Good morning and good coffee to you. You may notice I have a different coffee cup this morning, not because my redneck wine glass broke, but because I was feeling a little ostentatious, like a little flashy with that, and I just wanted to take it down a peg or two today. So I'm using my patented Atlas mason jar, which I believe came from some spaghetti sauce. So that's what I'm going with today. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jason Rutland, and as of this morning, I am fully and completely sick of politics. How about you guys? You guys done seeing all that stuff in your news feeds about how this is bad and that's bad, and this person's gonna get impeached and that person's gonna get this and that and the other thing? I'm officially sick of it this morning. So I wanted to do something that was today not particularly politically motivated, and talk about one of my favorite subjects and one of the most useful tools in the tool belt of not only the human but of the off-gridder. Also, there's been a lot of tragedy that's happened in the entire world over the last week, and you know, I think this will be a good subject to talk about in reference to those sorts of things as well. Although I don't want to get into those tragedies. They were tragic, in fact, and difficult to deal with, and that's all I want to comment on that today. So, the dynamics of failure. As I do on a lot of videos, I'm going to start off with some quotes that I found. The first one being, "Success is not a good teacher. Failure makes you humble." Ready? Success is not a good teacher. Failure makes you humble. That's a quote by Shah Rukh Khan, not Shaka Khan, Shah Rukh Khan. Two different people. And for those of you who know me in person, you know that my humble's pretty good. It's probably among the top 10 in the history of the universe, but hey. Hey Heather, how's it going? But it does. What you learn from, how many times have you succeeded at something and learned a lesson from it? You probably, the lesson that you learned was, hey, I'm pretty good, you know, or I'm more talented than I thought I was, you know, which just builds up a hubris that you can take into your next activity with you and really cause some blind spots in trying to solve the problem that you happen to have in front of you. So, and then there's Henry Ford. Said, "Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently." This is a big thing, right? That's a statement, in my opinion, that is totally based on the concept of learning from your mistakes and the concept of sanity, right? Which is the opposite of sanity is insanity, and I believe it was Albert Einstein who said doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. Good morning, Heidi. How you doing? So I think that's very important. Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. Now, I want to stop and say something about that. First of all, if you're watching, I'd appreciate it if you'd let me know that you're watching by hitting one of the reactions, or hit it 40 times or whatever you'd like to do, just so I know there's some people watching, and we can get going on the rest of this topic. So just reach down there, hit that reaction button a bunch of times, and let me know you're there. Hi, Corrine. Good morning. From New York. Awesome. Hey, thanks, guys. That's rad. I love starting it out that way. So, failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. So this off-grid life that we've got here, it's hard. It is very hard. And the amount of problems that you have to solve on a daily basis with the wrong tool and the wrong part, and you just have to make it go right. You just have to, go to the junk pile and find something that's remotely the same size, weld it together with something that's not even close, and make it work. That is the basic skill necessary to live off-grid. You have to be able to improvise. Problem with improvisation is that most of the problems that people face on their day-to-day life, especially if they live in a place where they have easy access to everything they could possibly need, is that people are unpracticed in it. They're unpracticed in the concept of improvising with what they have around. What can they actually solve the problem with? In my opinion, like I said, this is the most important skill to have as an off-gridder, because when you live 40, 50, 60 miles away from town, or even further, you have to get really good at being able to take something that you wouldn't necessarily think is useful and turn it into something that saves the day. This is important. So failure. I'd like to talk about a couple of my recent failures because I believe that they are poignant and whatnot. So I'm putting up this wind turbine tower, right? And it's an old radio tower because I didn't want to just use a pipe and go 40 feet up in the air. But I had this radio tower just kind of sitting around. It's one of you've probably seen them. They're triangular. There's 3 pipes that go up, and then it has like a ladder that's built around it. So I lay out a concrete slab, and I put some anchors in the bottom of it, and I do all of that stuff, all the stuff that's close to the ground, and then I bring the tower up, and so this tower is pretty huge. Good morning, Gerald. It's pretty huge. It's roughly 40 feet after the top part is put on it, and the pipe that's going to actually attach to the wind turbine and everything. It's about 40 feet. So after I put it all together, and I'm thinking conceptually, 40 feet. That's what, a 4-story building? No biggie. I got ladders that go 36 feet, When you put together a metal structure on the ground horizontally, that's 40 feet long, it's funny what happens when you try and tilt it up vertically. Even if it's not very heavy, there's a lot of leverage. There's a ton of leverage on a, what would it be? No, I was the fulcrum. It was the lever. So it's very difficult to deal with, okay? And it's heavy, but I have the mechanical advantage because I use a small tractor. So I'm thinking, I'm going into this with, ropes and pulleys, exactly. I'm going into this with the overwhelming confidence that I am going to have absolutely no problem putting this together. Good morning, Victoria, and getting this up there. My brother was in town, who's, just recently purchased 30 acres here in the county, and is going to be making the off-grid move here within the next couple of weeks, actually, or maybe month and a half or so. So he was here, and I'm big brother, so I got to be a good example of the off-gridder and how to solve problems, and I was doing this face a lot. Yeah, I understand what's going on here. Because again, my humble's pretty good. And so I got him to come over because I knew I needed help. I needed at least another hand. And before I brought the tractor up there, because it's up on a rocky knoll and all this other stuff, it's going to be really high once it's up. And I was like, check it out. This is all we have to do. You come over and you help me. Between the two of us, we're both blacksmiths. We're super strong, and I can lift a cow if I need to, and all of that stuff. Hey, Jeremy. So he comes over, we're looking at this thing, and we're both just kind of scratching our head. I mean, he's doing it overtly, and I'm doing it internally because I don't want him to know that I don't know what the hell I'm about to do, right? And so I was like, this is what we do. I'll be in the front, I'll lift up the top of the tower, and then you walk behind me with this 4x4 that I've got, and I cut a little notch in, and you just walk that bad boy up the steps as I'm tipping it over. And then, it'll come to, when it's just 99% of the way vertical, we'll slow down and we'll just let it come to an equilibrium standing up, and I'm all of the planning that I did went into the last probably 10 seconds of raising this thing. Come to find out, the difficulty was going to be in getting it to that 99%. I did not go at it at a very smart angle. I thought that I knew. I thought I knew exactly what I needed to do to be able to make this thing stand up. Now, one of the problems that I have had a lot of help from this lifestyle overcoming was thinking I know. If you've never done something before, you only think. You don't know, right? It's like having a belief, you know what I mean? You believe something to be true. You don't know it's true, and I don't know. That's one of those statements where people have all kinds of different thoughts about, but let's take it directly into the area of mechanical engineering, okay? If you've never done it before, you only think, you don't know. So here we are. My brother's got this 4x4. I got it all on video too. I'm going to put it up in the group once I actually get the thing up, because I think it would be kind of anticlimactic for it to end where it did when my brother was here. But we'll go from, once I get it actually standing and there's like the good guy wins success story at the end, then I'll edit it together and make a whole little thing out of it. But so we're starting, and I'm lifting up. I've got all my strength into it, and brother's right behind me. He's got that 4x4 and he's pushing up, and then setting it down so that it holds up the weight, and I can adjust to the next little rung and push. And the thing that I didn't take into consideration on that first attempt was that I was going to reach the middle of this tower, and the bottom was going to have more leverage on the other side. I was going to be the fulcrum, and there was going to be more leverage on the heavier side of the tower. So as soon as we got to the middle, and this thing is literally at a 45-degree angle, and it's not super heavy, but it's probably about 200 pounds. I was a wrestler in high school. I threw 200-pound people around all the time, which is my justification for thinking this was going to be the case. I never, though, in hindsight, ever threw someone who was 200 pounds but 40 feet tall. So I learned a thing or two about leverage. So we get to the center. He's got, or I get past the center, and he's got the center rung right there with this 12-foot piece of 4x4 with the notch in it. Wouldn't you know it, the top end of the tower just comes crashing down. And I'm pretty, I have pretty quick reaction time, but if you've ever had a baseball bat swung at your face, you know that it happens pretty quick. So brother's behind me, and I'm like, jump that way, and I middle blocked that bad boy to the side, and I ended up being able to push it off, and it rolled down the hill. It sheared off the bolts that were holding the whole thing together. I mean, it was a catastrophic failure. But I learned something. Not only the mechanical things, like, the amount of force that's being involved in this, but I also learned that lesson that I said a few seconds ago, which is, I don't actually know. You know what's funny, Gene? He did get hit in the head. He got walloped in the head a little bit. And, you know, I had this big old bruise on my arm. My arm was all swollen up from the, like I said, middle block. Felt like I was straight out of the Mortal Kombat video game, you know, or this, I don't know, one of the characters was throwing a frickin' radio tower at me, and I was just all, you know, the video game block. He doesn't hate me, but we got to learn a lesson together as a family, and it was very sweet. So, but I learned that lesson I was talking about, which is I don't actually know. Right? Yeah, that's the problem with being a know-it-all, is that you don't. You only think it all. So, thinking and knowing are two different things. So, it brought into my attention another quote that I had heard, and I had to look it up because I needed the verbatim. But this is by Calvin Coolidge, and I think it's very, very... yeah, exactly, Kelly. I think it's very poignant to this. Calvin Coolidge says, "Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence." Actually, let me back up. I watched the movie The Founder not too long ago. It was about Roy Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. And although, you know, I'm not an advocate of McDonald's themselves, the story of Ray Kroc is very, very inspiring to someone who has to overcome a lot of challenges in their life to accomplish what they want. Okay? This is a quote that he listened to over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. He had a little, you know, had it on a 45, and everywhere he would go as he'd travel around as a salesperson, selling these milkshake machines, every night he would play this 45 over and over again. Yeah, and I'm going to get to that, Bonnie. So, nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. It's kind of a long quote, but it's something that I think people could turn into a mantra for themselves. They could actually repeat it to themselves over and over and over in their head, because the only thing that will get you through any failure is persistence. Now, let me tell you how I persisted, because I hadn't learned the joke, or the, I'm going to say joke because it was a joke and I was the butt of it. The quote by Henry Ford yet, "Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time with more intelligence." So I began again. I got that part down. But I failed to do the more intelligence part. I was like, I got a tractor. Hold my coffee, you know. I got on the tractor and I climbed this little tractor. I don't know, actually, no, you can't see it from here. And I'm tethered to my Wi-Fi for right now to be able to do this video. So I got a tractor. I get on my tractor and I get up there and I climb it in first gear, going a 1/4 mile an hour, climbing up a hill like this of just lava rock, real slow. I get to the top and there's a little plateau. So here I go again. I lift the tower up onto the bucket of the tractor, because I only have like a 16-foot reach height-wise. So I put it on the tractor, you know, and I go, "Okay, Cody, now this is your turn. This is your job. You're going to stand over there at the back end. You're going to hold the bottom from falling out." And he's like, "I don't know, man." I was all about the last way that we went about this. Maybe we should stop and think a little bit. And I was like, no, I've been thinking the whole time. You know, I know, you know. So we go to start lifting, and I lift it up with the tractor, and we get the thing standing straight up and down. It's straight up and down. I'm like, yes. And then I realize my tractor is fully extended, so I cannot lift it, which it would totally have lifted, but I can't lift the tower the 3.5 inches that I need to lift it to be able to get it on the 3 pegs that are bolted to the concrete block. And I had one of those head slap moments. I was like, oh, you know. And if you heard that, I made some contact there, because that's how it really felt. It was like the forehead round of applause. You know, you ever do that? Forehead round of applause. And so now I'm stuck in a situation. Actually, at that very moment, I start hearing the tractor cough like it's running out of fuel. And I'm like, oh God, and it's a diesel. So I'm like, this is gonna suck. I'm supporting the whole weight of a 40-foot, tower that's going straight up and down. My tractor's running out of gas. Or out of fuel. I have to switch it off. Well, a couple of days ago, my daughter thought it would be funny to hit the button on my on the tractor that turns the glow plugs on, and that killed the battery. And then she also took the keys and put them in the exhaust there. I had to fish them out. I got a video on my profile of me fishing them out with using the high-def camera on my phone and the flashlight and a piece of wire. It was like doing orthoscopic or endoscopic surgery. I was actually feeling kind of accomplished from that. So I switched the tractor off, and I see the hydraulics start to just give just a little bit. So I'm like, real quick, I go and get the fuel, put the fuel in, go to turn the key. Frickin' battery's dead. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is happening. If it was just happening to me, I would be like, okay, I'll just overcome. But I got my brother who's, taking this huge leap of faith, buying off-grid property, and it's going to move his family and his business out of the city. And yeah, it was one of those days. So I go and get the battery charger. I kick the generator on. I hook the battery charger up. I put it on start. Well, of course, it had sucked air. Right? Yay. So I had to bleed the injectors. All the while, I've got a 40-foot radio tower attached to the front of my 16-foot high tractor bucket. Right, Bonnie? And it's just standing up there precariously. It's chained loosely so that, the chain could, would be able to move up and down on the thing. And so sooner or later, I get the whole thing, all the lines bled and everything else. And I'm like, what am I going to do now? I can't lift it. I can't drop the bucket. If I back up at all, it's going to fall. I got to take the chain off and just lean it there and see what I can do to make this whole thing work. So I do that. The second I take the chain off, the tilt on the bucket adjusted just slightly because the chain had tension on it. And it went bloop. The tower started to slide, and it was sliding towards Cody. So I was like, Cody, that way! And he jumped that way. The tower fell down. It again sheared the bolts off because it hit a rock at the top, sheared all the bolts in the middle that were holding the damn thing together. And I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore today. And that's when it hit me. I can't remember if this quote is who it's by. For some reason, when I think of it, I get a picture of Yoda in my head from Star Wars. And I remember a statement that went something like this. There is no failing. There is only quitting. And you see, that's why I look up these quotes and I find these quotes and I store them in my memory. I'm not so good at who said it or whatever, but I am really good at just remembering the quote. Because it gives me some kind of of like, well, this person who's been successful in this completely unrelated field said this about success, so maybe I can apply it to my situation. And you know, you have those things like you see a math problem, basic math, 2 and 2, you know, generally comes out to 4. You see 2 plus 2 and you think 4, right? Well, I think that way about these quotes that I will generally bring up when I'm doing these videos. So Cody had, you know, a long drive ahead of him, so I went ahead and sent him off. And I was like, okay, let me just stop and let me think about this rationally. What I need is I need the tower to go up. I need something to hold it from continuing to go up. I need a place where I can attach a pulley up high so that when I pull on that line, the tower wants to come up. I'm not fighting, you know, the structure itself. I need to attach the bottom to the points that it's going to pivot on so that it will, you know, it will pivot and won't just slide. How am I going to do that? So I take all of these guide wires that I put together. Right, Victoria. I put all of these guide wires together and I strung them up over the tree that is, you know, right in the area. The tree is about, I don't know, 20 feet, so it's still going to be another 20 feet above it, but strung it over there, attached it to the tractor, and got 45 feet away from the whole thing. So if it did fall, it wasn't going to fall on my head. Because my tractor's really slow, it's very difficult to get off of. And, you know, I don't think I would have been able to get out of the way had that not been one of the variables I needed to add into this whole equation. So, I do this. I take a guide wire and I tie it to the tree behind it. I go over the tree, I start pulling on it, and it just pops right up. No problem. Whoop. But time for another lesson. One guide wire to hold it in place, not enough makes. So as soon as it went straight up and down, it just fell over to the side. And I was like, yeah, this time I'm going to take another quote to heart, which was, in a fight, sometimes you get punched in the face. The wrong thing to do is to give up defending yourself. The right thing to do is to lie down, bleed a while, get back up and start swinging again. So I decided I was gonna take a day away from this and really think about what I needed to do and everything else. And that is essentially the point I'm at now. I feel through my failures on this subject that I have been able to come up with a solution that I can do, 1, by myself, 2, safely, 3, without breaking anything else, and 4, successfully. And I think that I never would have actually, had it just popped right up, all that would have done for me is proven to me in my own little universe that I'm a special little snowflake and that nobody is like me, and I'm the only one that could have solved this the first one around, because I know how I am. When I succeed at something, I feel very confident about it, even if I succeed at it once and there's 300 more opportunities to fail in front of me. That's just how I am, you know, and being able to acknowledge how you actually are and how you think and how you solve problems, that it might not be the best way, I think is something that will set you up for succeeding based on your failures. If you don't, you know, if you live in a place where you're not pushed and you don't have to solve any problems that have to do with your survival, chances are you're never going to grow. You know what I mean? You're never going to get better. You're never going to get smarter. You're never going to have more skill. The one thing about people who fail often is that the thing that they do even more often than that is try. They do. They actually get out there and make things happen. So what I've got set up now, and what I'm going to actually go out and do after this video is done, is I've got 2 guide wires going off at 90-degree angles from the tower itself in both directions. I've got my you know, my pulley up at the top of the tree and attached to the tractor over there. So, some of the individual things that I tried did work. It's putting them all together intelligently that I think is going to ultimately make this stupid tower that has bruised me and bonked my brother on the head and fallen and broken 3 times. It's going to make it stand up straight. And I'm going to have that frickin' wind turbine on top of that thing by the end of the day, because I don't want to run the generator anymore when we have days like today where the entire sky is just completely covered in smoke from a fire 200 miles away, and I'm not going to get any solar gain. That was, that was my rant there for a second. So Thomas Edison said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work." And that's how I feel right now. I haven't failed because I haven't quit. Now, if I quit, I will get back on a video next week and say I quit, and therefore I failed. But I have a different idea of what's going to go, what's going to happen. I think now that I have failed so miserably and been brought down several pegs on the old pegboard of life by this inanimate object who I was convinced prior to this project that I had superior intellect over, I feel like I'm going to win this time. I feel like I'm actually prepared and have solved the problems having to do with making this ridiculous thing stand at attention in opposition to gravity. And that's how I feel. I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that don't work. Now you'll notice that I'm actually very enthusiastic about this. I'm very I can't wait to get at it. And I think my last quote that I have to go over before we maybe do some questions, answers, and comments has to do with that. And I get asked a lot, how in your situation, how can you remain enthusiastic in these things? We'll run out of water and I'm like, all right, I gotta go get water. We'll have some weird electrical thing happen, so the solar stops working, the sun won't come out for 3 days, and I'm just like, back to work. And it's really because of a quote that I learned when I was 10. And it was very shortly after my dad died. My grandfather kind of, picked up being the male influence in my life. And he had a very strict set of rules that he lived by. A few of which I break on a daily basis. One of his rules was anything worth doing is worth paying someone else to do. I laugh at that every time I hear it, because my God, I could not imagine the bill that I would have if I paid someone else to do all the things worth doing here. But thanks, Grandpa, I love you. But he told me a quote by Winston Churchill. And, he was a member of the greatest generation. He, served in World War II, made it through the Great Depression, that whole, the whole 9 yards. So Winston Churchill was a very big influence to that particular generation. And he said, success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And this is one that I hold so dear. I love that. Ooh, I'm gonna make that my own. Who said that, Gene? The master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. I like that. Does the master also get on social media and communicate very openly about his failures and with a smile on his face? Because, I'd like to find and follow that guy. So success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. There are two things that I know are completely and totally true. One is that statement. Success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And the other is I have an infinite well of enthusiasm with which to act as my boat in my journey from failure to failure, because I'm one of the best mistake makers that I have ever met in my entire life. I fail more often than almost anybody that I've ever met. And so long as I maintain a ratio of 3 failures for every 4 times I try, then I'm succeeding. You know? Because that 4th time, for a lot of people, 3 times is a charm, not me. You know, 3rd time I finally have the opportunity to collate all of my losses and failures into a cohesive strategy and then take the thing out. But I know that if I fail at least 3 times out of every 4 times I try, I'm getting better. I'm improving. And so long as I maintain my own mental state, my own enthusiasm level, I will get to that 4th time. And I think this is what most people run into problems with when they go to live off-grid. They want to go and just, you know, if you've seen my my video on the 5 stages of off-grid living or off-grid transition, you know that the first phase is gleeful euphoria. They want to live in that stage, though, forever. They want to get to their property and just be like, oh my God, I'm home, you know, as the tree branches are smacking them in the face and they're just too euphoric to notice that they're bleeding. You know, the reality of the thing is that once you move into the 2nd phase, which is manic activity, you're going to realize how much there actually is that goes into this lifestyle. It's so much more work than anything you've ever done in your entire life prior. But you have to know that. And you have to know that going at it from an attitude of, I'm going to fail a bunch of times, but I'm going to succeed sooner than the person that didn't leave the city, and maintain the enthusiasm that you have for the process of failing and then succeeding at the end of that, or that failure being just a step on the way to your success. You know? If you can't maintain that and learn from your mistakes, like Gene's saying here, then you're going to definitely quit at living off-grid. Which, what have we said about quitting? There is no failing. There is only quitting. And I think that is something that everybody needs to take to heart in everything that they have set out to do in their life. If you want to do it, do it. If you make a video and it gets, my first video that I made still has 21 views. 21 views. It was almost unwatchable. I think it was me chopping wood or something like that. But now, I mean, I don't know what the views are at on this video, but generally by the end of my videos that I do on this group, there's 3,000-4,000 people who have watched it just by the end of the video. And I set out to make videos that help people to transition to off-grid living. You know, and we have a group here that has 150,000 members, people who want to go and live this life. And yeah, you can go on YouTube and you can find 50 million ways to build I don't know, to irrigate your garden, or how to build an aquaponics rig, or how to build a composting toilet. You can find so many different things about that. But the one thing I always wondered before I started making videos was, where's all the people who have gone through the struggles I've gone through? And I get to know them now that I have a small itty bitty bit of notoriety in the field. I have gotten to know a lot of these people who make the videos that get 500,000 views and everything else, and they're like, oh yeah, that happened to me. Oh man, that happened so many times. Oh, I failed at so many things, blah, 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 blah. Well, why didn't you ever tell anybody about that? Why make it look easy? It's not. Let people know that they're gonna fail, and it's okay. It's okay. It's actually the best way to go about it. Because I see here, no failure, or Gene says, there is no failure, only feedback. Well, you got to look at your property as a living organism. And when you fail to take care of it properly, it will give you feedback. It will tell you, it will let you know that you've done wrong. Whether by bruise, by blood, or by gentle whisper, it will happen. So, all of those things being said, I wanted to kind of end my rant with a quote that I got to get actually from the source of the quote, and is a gentleman named Will McLean, who was one of my sources of inspiration. He's a rancher, lives out here. I worked for him for about 2 years, and he would always say to me, Jason, truth is not a destination. Truth is the journey. Okay? And it took me a long time to understand what he was talking about, but now that I do, I try to use that concept in every video that I make, because a lot of times my videos make me look very foolish, and I consider myself a fairly intelligent person. But I just want people to know that it's okay. It's okay to look foolish. It's okay to be foolish from time to time. And it's definitely okay to fail and fail and fail, so long as with enthusiasm you do not quit. Because that is when you actually fail. That's when the dream is over. And I want to see you guys accomplish your dream. Okay? If you want to live off-grid, I want you to. And I want to help you. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know that my philosophy about off-grid living is that it could solve literally every problem that this world has. Every problem. That's not hyperbole. You give me a problem, I'll tell you how off-grid living can actually solve it. And so in my own little way, tiny, minuscule, insignificant way, I want to make the world a little bit better for my kids. I want to turn over to the next generation a world that isn't as screwed up as the one that you see when you turn on the news right now. And without getting too heavy, that's why I do this. And that's why I want people to understand that it's hard, but it's so worth it. And the growth that you can experience as a person, as a parent, as a member of society, there's nothing like it. You know, there isn't. And as I've said in earlier videos, this is what life is about. And if you gave all those people, like Gene's saying here, the problem with in today's society is that constructive criticism is seen as an insult. If you gave those same people that were always insulted and always just, you know, like, oh my God, I'm so offended by what you think and say. Why? You know what happens when you get offended? Nothing. The very next minute after you've changed your mind about being offended, life goes on. There it is. The secret of offense. If you gave those same people who were always offended problems that had to do with their actual life, problems that had to do with survival, problems that had to do with how they were going to plan out feeding their family next year, you gave them those problems, guaranteed every single one of these ridiculous issues we have going on in the world would melt away. You know why? Because there wouldn't be any damn time for that crap. Whew. So as I started this video, I'm Jason Rutland, and I'm sick of politics. But I do want to reiterate that this is the solution. This is the way that people can change the course of the history that we are inevitably writing down in books as we speak. And if we don't do something like this soon, it's going to reach a boiling point. And you know what happens when the water in your pressure cooker gets too hot, too much steam? Pressure cooker of life fails and you got an explosion, and I don't know if you know anything about BLEVE, boiling liquid vapor explosions. BLEVE, that's the type of explosion that is. They're very violent, you know, they're very extreme, and there's shrapnel involved, and it's a really interesting study of subject. Look up BLEVE, BLVE, explosion. It's some crazy stuff. Well, that's what's happening. So if we just spread out, put in a garden, raise some chickens, make decisions that have to do with your own survival and not that of people who lived, 100 years ago or whatever, I could see this world actually smoothing out a little bit. So let's open it up to questions, conversation aspect of things. I've hit some of the comments that have come up, but I know there was a bunch more that I didn't see. And then as soon as we're done with that, I'm going to get back on to raising that tower, and hopefully by the end of the day I'll be able to post a video on my personal profile, which, if you haven't had a chance, you can go ahead and follow that. I've got a couple of pages that have to do with off-grid living, how to, raising off-grid kids, all of that kind of stuff. You can go ahead and follow any one of those and find the information that I put out there. So if you have any comments, hey, thanks, Gene, that's awesome. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, maybe you want to share some of your own failures. Are there things that you have failed at and have learned a lesson from? I'd love to hear about those. I'm going to drink a little coffee while you guys type, because I know you guys are just you're typing away at it. Actually, that's something I'd really like to hear about. I'd like to hear that I'm not the only one who fails routinely. I'd like to hear about your failures. What have you done that didn't go right the first time, but after several times of trying, you were able to make it happen? You being truthful about how things go wrong helps me not feel like I need to hide mine. Good, Doris, that's awesome. That's exactly why I do this, because we can learn from each other's failures. Believe it or not, you don't actually have to fail at something. You can learn from what someone else did that didn't work. You want to talk out your plan with me or us? Sure. I have 2 guide wires at a 90-degree angle, so that when the thing tips up fully, it can't go one way or the other. I have attached to it a guide wire with a safety line, and I'm going to use the over-the-tree pulley to pull the tower up. I also disconnected the base plate and attached it to the tower first, so it's going to actually sit up on the base plate, which is wider than the triangle that's going on. Let's see, shared, your wins are coming. I shared, we expecting twins too. Heather, that's awesome. The twins are coming along great. They're growing exponentially. Carrie is, she's really uncomfortable. We actually had to call the doctor yesterday because she just felt so horrible. But apparently, that's twins. And it should be expected. That's awesome, Heather. I can't wait to hear about your twin experience. So let's see what Gene has to say too. The main thing I learned listening to you is what is worth doing yourself is worth paying for. I love that. That was my grandpa. He was actually a rocket scientist. He built parts for the Saturn V rocket. Then he patented an oil drilling O-ring that every offshore rig in the world uses. And so he, not until his mid-40s, he was very poor until his mid-40s. And then he had these ideas, got a machine and started making them. And retired later on, turning over his business to his son, who did not do it the same way, and his son does not own that business anymore. So anyway, he was a very smart guy. His favorite t-shirt that he would now this is something that I do take to heart with this project. His favorite t-shirt he would wear as a rocket scientist was "Gravity Sucks." And then we would argue because gravity doesn't actually suck, it pushes, you know. Space is pushing back on something that has displaced space, and that's gravity. We would argue about it, but I think he was just getting me in the mode of thinking like that. And Heather, yeah, it is normal, but it, you know, having 3 kids before, we again thought we knew, and we didn't. So Jessica, do you use the permaculture method? You know, ultimately, I think labeling different methods of gardening is kind of a useless thing. There's permaculture, aquaculture, and you know, huggleculture, and the Back to Eden method. And really, what it is giving plants what they need to grow. That's what it is. And I found we have tried each and every one of those. None of them work better than the others. What works is having good amended soil, planting stuff in it, and watering it, and feeding the vegetables, you know, what they need to survive. The square foot method and all of these different methods, just start gardening. You'll find what works for you on your property by doing it, rather than saying, oh, this should work based on what these people say, because what they're not telling you in those videos is all of the times that they felt, or that they failed, and all of the lessons that they learned from failing. Let's see about Gerald's recent failure. My recent failure was after I got the mower deck put together and new belt out of function. This is going to be funny, I think, to check it out because it was functioning. Problem solved. Nope. Belt got how, and boom, strap is, or let's see, belt is now a strap. Oh, so the belt came off. Was it the tensioner? The tensioner was sideways or something, or did the pulley cut into the belt? You can answer that later, but that, I understand. That kind of stuff happens to me all the time. New homesteaders might be like lab scientists experiencing trial and error. And not only trial and error, but trial and error in a way that's not building upon earlier, you know, successes. You know, maybe you didn't find, you know, like, let's take, what was it, Madame Curie, right? She didn't know that she was going to die of cancer from experimenting with radioactive particles. So, yeah. Ordered a new belt, 13 bucks. Oops, skipped over that. Sorry about that. We'll talk more about that, Gerald. That's interesting. When did you start living off-grid? Was there one thing in particular that motivated you? Yes. We're going on to our 7th year now of doing this. The thing that motivated me was seeing how crazy I was getting. I didn't have the awareness to look outside and go, the world has gone completely nuts. But I did have the awareness of that I was going nuts. I was being pushed into corners, and the finalizing thing was when my wife was pregnant with our second daughter, our next door neighbor, who was very rude, would step outside of his door and scream mariachi music at the top of his lungs at 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's when he started working, and would slam his security door. And one day I had had enough, and his door made this horrible out-of-tune violin sound where it was, you know, when it would open and close. So I ran over there with a big old industrial can of WD-40, and I started spraying it at his door. Well, he took it as I was trying to spray it in his house, so he, you know, jumped outside and got in my face. And, you know, one thing leads to another, and 16 police officers showed up at gunpoint, and you know, I realized that I needed to get away from having people piled on top of me. I can have neighbors, I can be part of a community, I can have all of those things, so long as I have a very defined line around my property that people cannot come if I have not invited them. And that was the, you know, underlying motivation for me. Carrie wanted to do what we had planned to do in our retirement, only when we had the energy to actually do it. And ultimately we just wanted a better life for our kids because we didn't have a yard. We lived in Simi Valley, super nice place, you know, by herd standards, you know. It's like having, you know, alfalfa for the whole field is all alfalfa and clover, you know. It's the herd. Anyway, so this is new, actually. There's actually a time limit on these live videos. You can only do an hour. Interesting. That's from the new update. But it has, in fact, been an hour. And I want to just tell you guys all that, you know, if you need help with something, PM me. I may not be able to get right back to you, or leave a comment in this thing. I get hundreds and hundreds of comments and private messages pretty much every day now, and I try to get back to all of them. If there's one thing that keeps coming up, I'll do a little video on how to solve it. But if you guys need help, or you need inspiration, or you're just about to quit and you need help to not fail, let me know, because I will do everything that I can to give you information that you can use to make a better decision about it. Because going back, once you've been in this life, going back out there is not an option. It is not an option. Doris, my health was getting so bad that my death was even being planned for. I left the rat race and it's getting better. That's awesome, Doris. I'm glad to hear that. Hey, Gerald, no problem, man. So why don't we do this? Why don't we end off? Everybody that's still watching, if you have the if you liked what I was saying, hit the little reaction button. If you loved it, hit the heart. If you laugh at me, hit the laugh. You know, if you're like, what? Hit the what reaction. And if you just hated what I said and thought that it had absolutely no value at all, hit the hate button, because that'll let me know that, well, that'll let me know something. I don't know. It'll let me know that in reference to you, I have failed. There it is. Yay! I don't even know who hit that, but it was probably Gerald, because he's a funny guy. Real quick, please. Let's see. Please give Alex Rush a shout out. I'm not sure who Alex Rush is, but shout out to Alex Rush. Is it a family member or something? I don't know. I live out in the mountains, so I don't follow a lot of stuff that I can't hear on the radio. But anyway, I'm going to get back on to putting my tower out. Awesome. Well, Alex Rush, shout out, man. I hope you continue watching and love what we're doing out here. Follow my Facebook profile, the page for the ranch, which I can't say the name of because that's against the rules. But if you go onto my page, you'll find it. And the kids' website too for homeschooling. Check it all out, and I hope you guys have a great day. It's an awesome day because the sun's not going to be blaring down on me because of all the smoke in the sky. So I'm going to get out, and I'm going to do something productive that's well thought out, and this will be my 4th try, and hopefully not my next series of failures, but the time that all those failures came together, coalesced into success. And I hope you guys learned something from me and my failures. Thank you very much for watching. I love you all to death, and I will see you next week for our 6-month anniversary show, which I don't know, that kind of seems very teenager, high school. I guess it's not an anniversary, it's a semi-anniversary. I don't know. Anyway, love you guys. Have a great day. Be productive. Put a smile on somebody else's face, and fail more often than you quit, because then sooner or later you'll arrive at success. Talk to you later.